The prairie wind howled like a wounded animal as storm clouds rolled in, turning the late afternoon into a dim gray blur. Rain lashed against the windows of the small farmhouse nestled between two ridges on the edge of nowhere. Inside Clara, Mae Thompson stoked the fire and tried to ignore the hunger gnawing at her belly. There was no supper on the stove tonight, just boiled water and old hope. It had been 2 years since her husband died, bucked off a wild mare and buried in the rocky hill behind the barn. Since then, Clara had done everything to keep the farm. Running, planting potatoes, tending the lone cow, and patching every hole in the roof herself. But no amount of grit could stop what was coming. The land taxes were overdue, and the third warning letter had arrived that morning, folded neatly, like a knife in her mailbox. She was about to bank the fire when she heard 3 sharp knocks on the barn door. Not the house door, which sat just 30 paces away, but the old sliding door of the barn. Her heart stuttered. Strangers didn't come out this far, especially not during storms. Grabbing her shotgun, Clara slipped on her boots and coat, then stepped into the wet night. The wind whipped her skirts and plastered her hair to her face. The barn door groaned open when she pushed against it, and there they stood. A pawn door, groaned open when she pushed against it, and there they stood, man and a boy. The man looked like he'd been carved out of the desert, itself broad-shouldered, dust-caked, and soaked through. He wore a battered hat low over his face, shadowing the sharp line of his jaw. The boy beside him was no older than 7 or 8, clinging to his father's coat, shivering. "Evenin', ma'am," the man said. His voice was deep, rough with travel, but polite. "Storm caught us off guard. I don't suppose you'd allow a man and his boy to bed down in your barn tonight?" Clara tightened her grip on the shotgun. "You carrying anything other than that saddlebag?" He shook his head. "Just my boy and a couple blankets. We don't want trouble. Just need a place to stay dry." She looked down at the boy. His lips were blue from cold, and his thin jacket clung to him like wet paper. Her eyes softened. "You can stay. 1 night," she said firmly, "and no wandering around my property. The barn's all you get." The man nodded with quiet gratitude. "Thank you, ma'am. Name's Jack. This here's Eli." Clara stepped aside and let them in, motioning toward the empty stall in the back. "There's hay in the corner. You'll be dry enough." She lit the old oil lamp hanging from a hook, casting a golden glow across the barn's wooden beams. As the rain pounded the tin roof, she watched Jack make a bed for Eli out of straw and a blanket, then wrap his own coat around the boy. The man moved like someone who'd done hard labor, deliberate and efficient, but there was tenderness in how he tucked the blanket around the child's shoulders. Clara surprised herself by walking over and handing the boy a chunk of cornbread she had left over from 3 nights ago. It was hard as a stone, but the boy took it with both hands and gave her a smile that melted a crack into her guarded heart. "You hungry?" she asked. Eli nodded. Jack started to protest, but Clara held up a hand. "Let the boy eat." She walked back to the doorway, arms crossed, watching the storm as it rattled the barn like angry fists. The man hadn't lied. He didn't carry anything but a saddlebag and a worn-out rifle tied to his saddle. No threat, no trouble. Just another soul, beaten down by the world same as her. "You from around here?" she asked without turning. "No, ma'am," Jack said. "Just passing through, looking for a fresh start." Clara almost laughed at the irony. "Weren't they all?" "Barn's yours for the night," she said, "but come morning you'll have to move on. I've got enough worries without strangers hanging around." "Yes, ma'am," Jack said softly. Clara didn't answer. She stepped back into the rain and shut the barn door behind her. As she trudged toward her lonely little house, she couldn't shake the strange sense that tonight had changed something, like 2 threads had crossed without knowing they were meant to be tied. Inside, the fire was low, the kettle still boiling. Just water, but out in the barn, for the first time in years, there was laughter soft and small from a boy who had just found shelter, and a man who was closer to home than he realized. The storm didn't let up by morning. If anything, it worsened. Clara stood by the window of her kitchen, arms folded tightly around her middle, watching sheets of rain turn her yard into a muddy mess. The sky hung low and gray, heavy with more trouble. She hadn't slept much. The wind had howled all night, and though she hadn't heard a single sound from the barn, her thoughts had been full of the man and his boy. She wasn't in the habit of letting strangers sleep on her property. Not since her husband died. Not since every man she met seemed to want something she wasn't willing to give. But there was something different about Jack Ransom, something tired in his eyes but steady in the way he stood. And the boy, Eli. He reminded her of someone she tried not to remember, the son she'd lost. A knock on the door broke her thoughts. She stiffened. One hand reached automatically for the shotgun in the corner. But when she opened the door, there was Jack, hat in hand, soaked again from head to toe. "Didn't want to leave without thanking you proper," he said. "But if it ain't too much trouble, I was wondering if you might need an extra hand today. I can chop wood, patch fences, even fix a roof if you've got one leaking." Clara eyed him suspiciously. She didn't like men who offered help too freely. Too often they expected something in return. Why would you do that? "You said you were just passing through." He gave a tired smile. "Storm's too rough to travel. And truth is, I'd rather earn our keep than take your kindness for free." She hesitated. Her barn roof leaked. The woodpile was almost gone, and one of the back fences had collapsed weeks ago under the weight of a panicked steer. She hadn't had the time or the strength to fix it. "I don't pay," she said. "Not a skin, you two." Clara studied his face. He didn't flinch under her gaze. She stepped back from the door. "You can chop wood today," she said. "Then you move on tomorrow, deal?" "Deal," he nodded. By noon, Jack had chopped enough firewood to stack neatly in rows behind the kitchen shed. Clara watched him through the window. He worked hard, every swing of the axe precise and clean. There was no laziness in him, no arrogance either. Just a quiet, worn-down steadiness. Eli stayed in the barn, reading a battered book under a blanket of hay. Clara brought him a bowl of thin soup, and the boy looked up with eyes that made her heart ache. "You been on the road long?" she asked. Gently. The boy nodded. "Since Mama died." Clara didn't ask more. She simply set the soup down and ruffled his hair, then walked away before he could see her tears. That evening, Jack returned to the house to thank her again. Clara handed him a dry shirt from her late husband's closet. It was too short in the sleeves, but better than walking around damp. "I appreciate it," he said, his voice low. "You're welcome," Clara replied, not meeting his eyes. They stood in silence. The crackle of the fire was the only sound in the room. For a moment, Clara felt the weight of loneliness pressing between them, thick and real. She cleared her throat. "If the storm don't pass by morning, you can stay one more night." "But that's it." Jack dipped his head respectfully. "Thank you, ma'am." Then he turned and stepped back into the barn, leaving her alone with a strange warmth she hadn't felt in years. That night, Clara lay in bed listening again, not to the storm, but to the absence of fear. She didn't know who Jack Ransom really was or why he was traveling with a boy and no destination. But she knew hard men and liars, and drifters with secrets. Jack wasn't like them. She didn't trust him yet. Not fully, but something told her she might have just let the right stranger stay. The storm finally cleared on the third day. The sky stretched wide and blue over the open land, and morning light spilled across Clara May's worn fields like a silent promise. The wet soil steamed gently under the sun, and puddles shimmered across the wagon trail that curved behind the barn. Birds had returned, chirping from fence posts and tall grasses, their songs sounding foreign after 2 days of thunder and wind. Jack Ransom stood beside the woodpile he'd finished stacking the day before, sleeves rolled to his elbows, hat tipped back as he surveyed the horizon. Clara had expected him to leave at first light, but he hadn't. Instead, he'd asked, calm and direct, if he could fix the back fence she mentioned. Said it wouldn't sit right to leave something half done. Clara didn't argue. The truth was, she couldn't do the repairs alone. And she didn't want him gone just yet, though she'd never admit it out loud. So she told him where the busted fence line lay, just beyond the cottonwood grove near the edge of her land. What she didn't know was that Jack already knew that grove very well. As he led his borrowed horse through the brush, tools clanking in a saddlebag, Jack kept glancing at the trees ahead, the cottonwoods with white bark scarred by initials from decades past. The air smelled like damp earth and pine, thick with memory. He dismounted near the broken post and knelt beside it, clearing away weeds. He didn't just see a broken fence, he saw a boundary line. Because all of this wasn't just any land. It was his land, inherited 2 years earlier from a half-uncle he'd never met. A bitter, childless rancher named Otis Ransom who'd written Jack into his will because he was the only kin left not rotting in prison or the grave. Jack hadn't cared much about the inheritance at the time. He was a drifting widower with a grieving boy trying to survive after his wife died from a fever in Kansas. He'd left the papers in a trunk, unread for months. Only recently had he finally looked into it. Only recently had he come to see the place. Now here he was. And it wasn't empty like the lawyer said. A woman, a stubborn, proud, resilient woman, was living on it, working it, bleeding for it. Clara Mae Thompson had no idea. The ground she scraped a living from wasn't legally hers anymore. Jack didn't know what to do with that. He stood up slowly, eyes sweeping over the fields. The barn, the house, the lone cow, the broken windmill. He saw the rough edges of someone fighting to hold on. He saw her everywhere. He couldn't just take it from her, but he also couldn't lie forever. Later that day, Clara brought him a tin cup of water as he worked. Her hair was braided loosely down her back, and the sleeves of her dress were rolled up past her elbows. She didn't smile, but her eyes were softer than they'd been the day he arrived. Fence line looks straighter than it's been in years, she admitted. You know your way around land. Jack nodded, wiping sweat from his brow. Spent some years building with my hands. Worked ranches from Dakota to Texas. She studied him for a moment. Why'd you leave all that? He didn't answer right away. Then, because sometimes you lose more than you can carry. And moving feels easier than remembering. Clara didn't press. She just nodded. She understood that kind of weight. That evening, Jack wandered the property again alone, silent, thinking. He walked the field edges, tested the soil between his fingers. Good land, hard, but fertile. With enough hands and time, it could thrive. Eli met him near the barn, holding Clara's cat in his arms like it was a treasure. Can we stay, Papa? He asked quietly. I like it here. Jack looked down at his son, heart aching. He thought of Clara's weary eyes, her calloused hands, her quiet strength. He wanted to say yes, but how could he tell her the truth? That the man she let sleep in her barn was the legal owner of the land beneath her boots? How could he tell her without breaking the trust he hadn't even fully earned? Jack placed a hand gently on Eli's shoulder. We'll see, he said. But he knew the day was coming when the truth would rise like seeds under warm soil. And when it did, he wasn't sure if Clara Mae would forgive him or ever let him stay again. The next morning dawned bright and clear, and with it came the return of Clara Mae's guarded demeanor. She was back to rising before the sun, her boots crunching across the frost-slick ground as she tended the livestock and checked the barn. The storm may have passed, but the fight to survive never left. Jack watched her from the edge of the porch, where he'd taken to sipping coffee each morning before starting on the day's work. She moved with a kind of determination forged by hardship, shoulders squared, steps steady, never pausing longer than she had to. She reminded him of a Mustang he'd once seen, fierce, wounded but unbroken. Clara saw him watching and frowned. "Don't you have work to do?" Jack smirked. "Just waiting on the boss to tell me what's next." She tossed him a pair of work gloves, the well pump sticking again. "And if that roof on the chicken coop gives out one more time, I'm going to set the whole thing on fire and let the chickens figure it out." Jack chuckled. "Got it. Water and chickens." But beneath the easy banter, tension brewed. Jack hadn't yet told her the truth, not just because he didn't want to hurt her, but because he didn't know how. Every time he tried to speak, he saw the way she looked at her land like it was all she had left between her and the world that kept taking. She didn't wear her pain like a wound. She wore it like armor. And yet, as the days passed, Jack began to see cracks in that armor. That afternoon, he found her in the barn, kneeling beside a sickly calf. Her hands trembled slightly as she tried to coax it to drink from a bottle, but the calf refused. Its sides heaved with shallow breaths, its eyes dull. "I've tried everything," Clara muttered, frustration in her voice. "I don't have the money for the vet. Don't even have the money for the feed I need this winter." Jack crouched beside her, saying nothing at first. He placed a gentle hand on the calf's flank, then reached for the bottle. "Mind if I try?" Clara hesitated, then nodded. Jack worked the bottle gently, letting the calf sniff and lick. After a few minutes of patience and soft murmurs, the animal began to suckle. It wasn't much, but it was something. Clara stared, her expression unreadable. "How'd you learn to do that?" she asked. "My wife was good with animals," Jack said softly. "Taught me most of what I know." Clara's eyes lowered. "You were married." Lost her 2 winters ago." A long silence settled between them. Clara rose slowly, dusting off her hands. "Everyone's lost something, haven't they?" Jack looked up at her, brow furrowed. "You?" She didn't answer at first. Then, almost too quietly to hear, she said, "My son. 6 years old. Fever took him. My husband died 2 years after that." He couldn't take the silence. Jack stood as well. "And you stayed, even with nothing left." Clara turned to him, jaw tight. "This land is mine. My blood is in this soil. I don't care how many banks want to take it or how many storms tried to drown it. I'm not leaving." Jack swallowed hard. His heart thudded against his ribs. She didn't know. Not yet. And when she found out, "I admire that," he said quietly. "Most people would have walked away. I'm not most people." "No," Jack agreed. "You're not." That night, Jack found himself awake long after Eli had drifted off to sleep. He lay on his back in the barn loft, staring at the rafters. Clara's words echoing in his ears. "This land is mine." But it wasn't, not legally. Not anymore. And when she found out, she'd never forgive him. Jack reached for the old envelope hidden deep in his saddlebag, the deed with his name on it. The one that said he owned every inch of the ground she fought so hard to protect. He folded it back up and shoved it away. Not yet. She wasn't just a woman scraping by on borrowed dirt. She was a force, a survivor. And no piece of paper should ever be enough to break her spirit. But lies had weight too, and the longer he waited, the heavier it became. The days began to settle into an odd sort of rhythm. Jack worked the land like it was his own, fixing things. Clara had long since given up on mending the barn door hinges, patching holes in the roof, even digging out a dry ditch so the chicken co-op wouldn't flood next time it rained. Clara said little about it, but she noticed everything. The land itself seemed to respond to Jack's steady hands. slowly coming back to life under his quiet care. Eli, too, had changed. The boy no longer flinched at loud noises or curled into himself when spoken to. He laughed full, real belly laughs and followed Clara around like a pup. She found herself talking to him more, teaching him how to milk the cow, showing him where the wild mint grew near the creek. He was eager and curious, always asking questions, always eager to help. One morning, while Clara knelt in the garden pulling weeds, Eli came up behind her and said the word that stopped her heart cold. "Mama?" Clara froze. The word hung in the air like smoke. She turned slowly. Eli stood there barefoot, clutching a bruised apple, his face open and unafraid. "Mama," he repeated, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Her breath caught in her throat. She looked over at the barn where Jack was shoeing his horse. He hadn't heard. Clara knelt in front of the boy, swallowing the knot in her throat. "Eli, I'm not your mama." The boy shrugged. "You feel like one." She didn't know what to say to that. Her hands trembled as she brushed a piece of straw from his hair. "I'm just helping you and your pa." "You smell like—" "My mama used to, like dirt and soap and cinnamon." Tears pricked the backs of her eyes. She turned away before he could see them. "Go help your pa, sweetheart." He grinned and ran off, apple in hand. That night, Clara lay awake staring at the ceiling. Her mind wouldn't stop replaying that moment. Mama. A single word had opened up a wound she thought had long scabbed over. She hadn't heard that name in years. Not since her own little boy Henry passed in her arms, burning with fever. That single syllable had once made her world feel whole. Then it became a knife. But when Eli said it, it hadn't hurt, not the same way. It felt like sunlight cracking through stone, and that terrified her. The next day, Jack found her by the fence line, inspecting the posts he'd recently repaired. He noticed the tired lines around her eyes and the way she kept avoiding his gaze. "Something wrong?" he asked gently. Clara hesitated. "Your boy, he called me Mama yesterday." Jack's face softened, but he didn't seem surprised. He's been missing his for a long time. He remembers pieces, her voice, her smile. "I reckon he sees something familiar in you." Clara folded her arms. "He shouldn't. I'm not trying to take her place." "I know that," Jack said quietly. "So does he. But that doesn't mean he don't feel safe with you." Clara turned to him, eyes hard but shining. "He deserves more than me." "No," Jack said firmly. "He deserves exactly someone like you." Clara looked away, heart pounding. No one had spoken to her like that in years, with conviction, with respect. Most men dismissed her, pitied her, tried to fix her. But Jack saw her, and it shook her more than she wanted to admit. Later that evening, Clara found a hand-drawn picture on the table. Eli had used charcoal and paper from her pantry to draw 3 stick figures, one tall, one medium-sized, and one small, holding both their hands. Above them was a crooked house and a big sun. She picked it up slowly. At the bottom, in careful, misspelled letters, "Me, Papa," and "Mama." She pressed the paper to her chest and sank into the nearest chair. She didn't want to love this boy or his father. She didn't want to hope again. But it was getting harder and harder not to. And outside, in the barn, Jack Ransom sat beside the lantern light, holding the deed once more in his hands. The paper that could destroy the only bit of peace Clara had left. He watched his son sleep with a smile on his face and a blanket wrapped around his shoulders, safe and warm, and Jack knew every moment he delayed the truth made it that much harder to speak. But how do you tell a woman who's just begun to breathe again that the very land beneath her feet no longer belongs to her? The clouds rolled in again, heavy and dark as evening settled across the prairie. Clara glanced at the sky and sighed. Another storm. Her shoulders ached from digging up old potatoes that morning, and the roof still leaked above her bedroom. Jack had promised to fix it, but there hadn't been time yet. She lit the lanterns in the barn, calling the animals inside just as the first drops began to fall. Jack was already there, pitching hay with steady, practiced rhythm. His shirt was damp from sweat and dust, and when he saw her come in with that familiar tired scowl, he gave a small smile. "You always look like you're ready to fight the sky itself," he said. She huffed. "That's because the sky keeps picking the fight." Lightning flashed beyond the barn doors, followed by a low rumble of thunder. Clara moved to close the big sliding door, but the wind caught it, nearly tearing it from her grip. Jack rushed to help, and together they slammed it shut, the impact echoing through the barn like a gunshot. For a moment, they stood there both out of breath, both soaked by sudden rain just inches apart. Clara turned toward him to say something, but her words caught in her throat. He was closer than she meant to let him get, and his eyes weren't just steady now, they were searching. "Clara," Jack said quietly, "I need to tell you something." "Don't," she interrupted. "Not yet. I don't want to hear anything heavy tonight. Not while thunder's still breathing down my neck." His brow furrowed slightly. "You don't even know what I was going to say." "I know it had weight," she said, stepping back. "And right now, I can't carry anything else." She turned to walk away, but something stopped her. The way Eli had said "Mama," the way the wind howled like a memory at her back, the way Jack had looked at her just now, like she wasn't broken, just unfinished. She turned around again. "Don't know what I'm doing," she said. "I didn't ask for this. I didn't ask for you. Or him. Or the way everything feels like it's shifting beneath my feet." Jack stepped forward slowly. "I didn't ask for it either. But maybe that's how it's meant to happen when we're not looking." The barn creaked as wind blew through its upper rafters. Rain pounded harder, like the sky wanted to wash away the past. Then Jack reached out and gently tucked a strand of wet hair behind her ear. "Tell me to stop," he whispered. She didn't. Instead, Clara leaned forward, her breath catching as he pulled her into a kiss. It wasn't wild or desperate. It wasn't soft either. It was real, like soil and fire and all the things they both thought they'd never feel again. The kiss deepened, the storm around them building in rhythm with the pulse between them. Her hand slid up his arms, and for a moment, just a moment, she let herself be held. Not out of need or sorrow, but because she wanted to be. When they pulled apart, breathless and trembling, Clara stepped back, eyes wide. "I shouldn't have done that," she said. "Maybe not," Jack replied. "But I'm not sorry." Neither was she, but the fear crept in anyway. She didn't sleep that night, not because of the kiss, but because of what it meant. She'd built walls to protect herself after her husband died. Walls of work and silence and distance. And now this stranger, with quiet hands and broken eyes, was chipping away at them like he belonged. And worse? Part of her wanted him to. Jack didn't sleep either. He sat by the barn doors long after the rain stopped, staring into the blackness, the kiss burning on his lips and the truth burning deeper still. He had to tell her about the deed, about the land, about everything. But he, COULDN single quotes T. Not yet, not after tonight, not after tasting the woman who still didn't know. She'd given her heart to the man who could take everything away. The morning after the kiss, the world felt different. Clara busied herself in the kitchen, trying to pretend that nothing had changed. But her fingers trembled when she poured coffee. Her heart still raced whenever she remembered the feel of Jack's lips against hers, the warmth, the quiet ache of something long denied. Outside, Jack chopped wood like a man trying to bury a secret under every swing of the axe. They didn't speak much that morning. Eli sensed the tension, his questions quieter, his movements more careful. By noon, Clara had decided to ride into town to pick up supplies and check the post. The last time she'd gone, there had been another warning from the bank. She feared there'd be another today. "I'll be back before sundown," she said, grabbing her shawl. "You sure you don't want company?" Jack asked gently. "I need to be alone." He nodded, though his chest tightened as Clara rode away, her figure growing smaller against the golden hills. Jack went to the barn. He couldn't wait any longer. He took the old leather saddlebag from the loft, opened the hidden flap, and pulled out the folded deed. The truth he had kept buried. Too long. He stared at it for a long time. Then he left it on her kitchen table right in the center, weighted down with a small stone from her garden. Clara returned just as the sun began to dip behind the hills. She looked tired, worn out from dust and silence. In her bag were a few jars of preserves, some coffee beans, and a single letter from the county, another final notice, this time with red ink stamped across the envelope. Her stomach turned as she stepped into the house. Then she saw it. The paper on her table. At first, she thought it was another foreclosure notice blown in by the wind. But the handwriting was different, older, hand-signed. Her eyes narrowed. She stepped closer, pulled the rock away, and unfolded the yellow document. It was a deed. The land deed. Her land. Only it wasn't in her name. It was in Jack Ransom's. She read every word twice. The legal language was thick, but clear. The land she'd worked. The soil she'd bled over. The house she'd built her marriage in. All of it signed over 2 years ago to a man she had unknowingly let sleep in her barn. Her hands began to shake. Her legs buckled, and she sank into the nearest chair. How long had he known? How many days had he walked beside her, kissed her, let her believe she still owned the ground beneath her feet? She stormed into the barn, face flushed with fury. Jack stood near the tack wall, cleaning the bridle. When he turned and saw the paper in her hand, he knew. "Clara, you lied to me," she said, her voice shaking. "I didn't lie. Don't you dare." Her voice cracked like a whip. "You came here. You let me believe you were just a drifter, just a man passing through. And all this entire time, you owned this land." "I didn't know at first," Jack said. "Not until I saw the boundary markers, the old cottonwoods. You should have told me. The moment you knew." "I couldn't. You were hanging on by a thread. I saw it. I felt it. I didn't want to hurt you." She stepped back like he'd slapped her. "So instead, you kissed me. You let your son call me Mama. You made me feel safe here again just so you could watch me fall apart when the truth came out." "That's not what this is," he said, stepping forward. She raised a hand to stop him. "Don't. Clara, I didn't come here to take anything from you. I never planned to evict you, never planned to claim this place. I just wanted to see what kind of place I'd inherited. You inherited my life, and you stood there while I fought for scraps of it." The silence was brutal. Finally, Jack said, "If you want me gone, I'll leave tonight." Clara didn't respond. Her jaw clenched, her eyes full of unshed tears. Jack took one last look at her, this fierce, beautiful woman who had let him in, and walked away, back toward the barn. She didn't stop him. Not this time. That night, Clara sat at the kitchen table, the deed lying before her like a curse. She had trusted him, and he had waited, just long enough to break her. Jack didn't sleep that night. Neither did Clara. The barn was colder than usual, but Jack didn't light the stove. The silence inside mirrored the hollow pit in his chest. Eli slept wrapped in blankets in the loft, unaware of the storm between his father and the woman he'd begun to think of as home. Jack sat on an overturned bucket, staring at the dirt floor, the rain tapping soft rhythms against the tin roof. The sound used to comfort him. Now it felt like a clock ticking towards something final. He had come to this land expecting to find dust and bones. Instead, he found her. And her fire, her stubbornness, her grief-soaked strength. He found something that felt like a second chance. A reason to stop running. A place where Eli smiled again. And now, all of that was ruined. Because he had waited too long. In the house, Clara sat at her kitchen table, eyes fixed on the deed. It hadn't moved, but her life had. It had shifted beneath her like an earthquake, quiet but devastating. She had trusted Jack, more than she'd trusted anyone in years. She had allowed him into her home, into her land, into her heart. And all. This time, he held the power to take it all away. She wanted to hate him. Truly she did. But beneath the fury and betrayal, something far more dangerous stirred, the ache of longing. Longing for the man who had held her like she was whole. Who had worked beside her without asking for anything in return. Who had shown her what it felt like to be seen again. But could she forgive him? Could she let herself believe that he wasn't just another man with kind eyes and cruel secrets? The next morning, Jack didn't wait for her to come to the barn. Went to her door. He didn't knock. He stood, hat in hand, eyes shadowed from a sleepless night, waiting for her to see him standing there. When she opened the door. She didn't say a word. Neither did he. Not at first. "I'll sign it over to you," he finally said. "All of it. The land, the house, the water rights, everything. I don't want it." Clara's eyes narrowed. "You can't fix this with paperwork." "I know. Then why are you here?" Jack drew a breath, voice low and rough. "Because if I walk away now, I'll regret it every day for the rest of my life. And not just because of the land, because of you." Clara looked away, jaw tight. "You should have told me the truth." "I was going to. That night in the barn, when we kissed. But then I saw how you looked at me, like maybe I was something worth holding on to, and I got scared that telling you would ruin it." "It did," she said flatly. Jack nodded. "I know." There was a long pause. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out the deed again. "This is yours now. No tricks, no strings. I already signed it over and sent copies to the county office this morning." Clara blinked. "Why would you do that?" "Because I meant it when I said I wasn't here to take anything from you, and because Eli, he already lost one home. I can't let him lose another. Not if I can help it." Clara stared at the paper, the signature in ink. Her name now listed as the owner. Legal and final. It was everything she thought she'd lost. And somehow, it felt heavier than before. Later that day, Jack saddled his horse. He didn't say goodbye to Eli. He just gave the boy a long hug and told him to listen to Clara. Then he rode to the edge of the ridge and stopped. He looked back once. The land stretched behind him like an old song, full of memories he hadn't lived but now felt tethered to. The woman standing on the porch didn't wave. She didn't call after him, but she watched, right up until he disappeared beyond the hill. That night, Eli cried himself to sleep in Clara's arms. And Clara? She stared out the window long after the oil lamp burned out, heart torn between everything she had ever lost and the one man who'd almost made her believe she could have something again. 2 weeks passed. The land grew quiet again, but it was a silence Clara couldn't settle into. Jack was gone, and with him went the strange new warmth that had started to make the farmhouse feel like home again. She worked harder than ever repairing, fixing, maintaining, but it was like patching holes in a boat already half sunk. The deed had come back from the county office, stamped and official. Jack had made good on his word. The land was hers legally, finally. And still, she felt more lost than ever. Eli barely smiled now. He helped her with the chores, ate his supper without a fuss. But his eyes searched the horizon every evening, hoping his father would return. Clara didn't know what to say to him, how to explain why a man would walk away from a woman and a boy who both wanted him to stay. Then, on a Tuesday morning, a notice was nailed to her gate. Despite the land transfer, the county had fast-tracked the auction on the homestead's unpaid property taxes, those debts accrued under her name before Jack had ever stepped foot there. The total was more than she could afford. Twice as much. The auction was scheduled for Saturday. Clara stood in her parlor holding the paper, numb. All that fighting. All that surviving. And now, she was going to lose the land anyway. The land Jack had given back. Saturday came swift as a knife. The town gathered at the courthouse square, the crowd murmuring beneath a tall wooden platform where a red-faced auctioneer stood in a wide-brimmed hat, tapping a small bell impatiently. Clara arrived in a worn gray dress and mud-stained boots. She didn't bother hiding her desperation. Everyone knew she was here to watch her land get sold out from under her. Eli stood beside her, holding her hand tightly. His face was pale with worry, but he didn't say a word. The auctioneer cleared his throat. Parcel number 212, 100 acres west of the ridge, including water access and 2 outbuildings. Opening bid at $500. Clara's heart sank. She had $22 to her name. The crowd shifted. A man in a pressed vest raised his hand. $500, he said. $550, another man barked. $600. The thin numbers climbed, and Clara closed her eyes. It was over. She had lost it all. Then a low, calm voice rang out over the crowd. 1,000. Gasps rippled through the townsfolk. Clara's eyes snapped open. Jack Ransom stood at the edge of the crowd, hat in hand, coat dusted with trail dirt, face calm but resolute. He didn't look at her. Not yet. The auctioneer blinked. Do I hear? 1,100? Silence. Going once, going twice. Sold to Mr. Ransom. Clara felt the blood drain from her face. He walked toward the courthouse steps, collected the signed auction paper, then turned slowly and finally looked at her. His eyes were steady, unreadable. She stepped forward, voice hoarse. Why? Because you shouldn't have to fight anymore, he said. Not for land you've already bled into, but it's yours again now, she whispered. You bought it. No, Jack said gently, pulling a second folded deed from his coat. I didn't buy it for me. He handed the paper to her. Her name was on it. Again. Paid the taxes. The land's still yours. For good this time. Clara stared at him, stunned. You do all that? After everything? Jack shrugged. You gave my boy a home when we had none. You gave me a reason to stop running. You deserve more than just survival, Clara. You deserve peace. She looked down at the paper in her hand, then back at the man who had just saved her life again. And this time, there were tears, real ones. Back at the homestead, the sun hung low, turning the fields gold. Clara walked beside Jack through the garden rows, both of them quiet. Finally, she said, You didn't have to come back. I know, he replied, but I couldn't stay gone. Not when every mile between us felt like a mistake. She stopped walking. And what now? Jack took a breath. That depends on you. She turned to him. I don't want to fall. Again, Jack, not just to be left behind. You won't be. You left once. I won't leave again, he said. Not unless you ask me to. Clara searched his eyes. Then slowly she took his hand in hers. Then stay, she said. Softly. Stay, and let's stop surviving. Jack pulled her into his arms, holding her like she was the last piece of home he ever needed. Summer faded gently into fall. The fields turned from green to gold, and Clara's land, hers, finally and fully began to thrive in a way it hadn't in years. With Jack's help, the windmill turned again. The soil softened under Eli's bare feet, and the once cracked boards of the barn and fence line gleamed with fresh nails and care. Jack stayed, not just as a farmhand, not just as a guest, but as a man rebuilding a life. And slowly, Clara let him in, not all at once, but piece by piece. Trust had to be earned, and he never rushed her. He woke early, worked beside her, ate meals with Eli at the table. He listened when she spoke and never tried to fix what didn't need fixing. There were no grand promises, no sweeping speeches, just quiet love, steady and true. One chilly morning, Jack was teaching Eli how to whittle by the porch while Clara hung laundry on the line. The wind tugged at her dress, and she paused for a moment, watching the boy laugh. At his crooked little stick figure, she smiled, genuine and soft. Jack caught her gaze and tilted his head. "What are you thinking?" Clara wiped her hands on her apron. "I'm thinking. This is the first time in years this place feels like home." He stood slowly and walked over, hands rough and warm as he gently took hers. "It always was," he said. "You just needed someone to fight for it with you." She looked up at him. "I didn't think I could ever let someone in again." Jack ran his thumb across her knuckles. "You didn't let someone in, Clara. You built something. With your hands, with your hurt, with your heart. I just showed up lucky enough to earn a place in it." Tears welled in her eyes, not from sadness, but relief. He kissed her there in the garden, beneath the laundry line, with the sunlight dancing between the cotton sheets and the wind wrapping around them like a soft hymn. That evening, Clara brought out a pie she'd been saving, apple and cinnamon. Eli declared it the best pie he'd ever had, even better than the ones his mother used to make. Then he quickly apologized, eyes wide. Clara only smiled. "It's okay, sweetheart. You can love us both." And something in Eli relaxed for. The first time, he didn't feel like he was forgetting his past. He felt like he was growing into his future. A week later, Clara rode into town with Jack and Eli. She wore a soft green dress she hadn't touched in years and even let Jack braid her hair. At the general store, people stared not in judgment, but in quiet awe. The woman who had been widowed, broken, nearly driven off her land, was walking tall, with a man at her side and a boy holding her hand. The sheriff tipped his hat. The banker looked the other way. The storekeeper gave her a basket of apples for free. "Looks like folks respect you now," Jack murmured as they loaded the wagon. Clara gave a small smile. "They respect the woman who didn't give up." "You did more than that," he said. "You let yourself live again." That night, as stars stretched across the prairie sky, Clara sat on the porch swing, wrapped in a blanket. Jack joined her, handing her a mug of warm cider. "Cold's coming." "Early this year," she said. Jack nodded. "We'll be ready." She looked out at the barn, where Eli was drawing in the dirt with a stick. "This land nearly broke me," she whispered. "And now it's given me everything." Jack placed his arm around her shoulder. "It didn't give you anything, Clara. You earned it. Every sunrise, every blister, every sleepless night. You made it yours." She leaned against him. "It's ours now," he smiled. "Then maybe it's time to build something new on it." Her heart fluttered. "Like what?" He took her hand, his voice steady as the land beneath them. "Like a life. For all three of us." She didn't say yes. She didn't have to. She leaned in, rested her head on his chest, and whispered, "Welcome home." The wind carried their laughter into the fields, and under that vast western sky, three hearts found something rare and sacred, not just survival, but belonging, and finally, peace.